This video is for the person in the thumbnail, which used to be me. I used to be super skinny, and now I've went from this to this. And in this video, I want to basically help you and tell you exactly what I think would have helped that version of me to make progress faster. And chances are, if you clicked on this video, you're probably pretty skinny, just like how I started. And pretty much, I'm just gonna tell you like exactly what I think is going to get you results faster. And there's 5 points that I want to make that I think if I knew sooner, I would have just made progress way faster. And you know what? I could sit here and just give you some like generic advice, and I'd probably sound more correct for saying, just like basic stuff like, oh, train to failure, do this. But I'm just gonna tell you, even if maybe I'm not as much of an expert in some of these things, and even if it doesn't sound super correct and basic, it's what I think will actually help you. Okay, so let's get into the things that I would tell my younger self to go from skinny to having an aesthetic physique. So the first thing is regarding training to failure. Now, obviously, you've always been told, train hard, train to failure, but that's not really what I'm going to say in this point. And it might contradict with some points later in the video, but this point is basically you shouldn't actually train as much to failure. Now, hold on, because you still should train to failure, but the key point is to not sacrifice your form just to push to failure. Because, of course, when I'm starting out, like I want results really bad, right? And everyone's saying train to failure. So I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can push hard. But the thing is, a lot of the times, just because you're pushing hard doesn't mean you're actually using the muscles that you're trying to grow, right? So, for example, if you're doing like dumbbell press, right? If you just arch your back super hard, and if you just think about moving the weight from point A to point B and going all the way to failure like that, you're not really going to be getting as much out of your pecs versus if you're actually thinking about trying to train your pecs. Like I remember I used to do incline dumbbell press and I would just arch like crazy and just use terrible form, but I was going to failure. Really, failure is when you can't do the movement while still using the muscle. Like yeah, sometimes you can get more reps if you just like shift things around and sort of orient stuff. Like for example, on a press, if you really arch your back and flare your rib cage, you can probably get more reps, but is that really going to grow your chest more? No, it's not. And so sometimes it'll seem kind of easy to like just grind out a rep, but really you got to stop and like really try to use the muscles that you're trying to train to actually do that rep versus just getting the weight up and just getting the weight from point A to point B. Because listen, powerlifting is getting the weight from point A to point B, but bodybuilding is actually stimulating the muscles to grow, right? And so, as controversial as it may sound, and as much as people probably don't want to hear it, powerlifting and bodybuilding are not the same thing. Moving the weight from point A to point B is not the same thing as actually training the muscle. Because when you're just focused on moving the weight from point A to point B, it's like your body is going to use whatever is basically the easiest to get that weight up, and it's going to sort of spread out the force and just put it through your joints and orient stuff and optimize external leverages and internal leverages just to move the weight because that's the goal it's trying to achieve, and your body always wants to take the easiest route. So it's not going to just always like stimulate one particular muscle and really fatigue it. Like you have to actually think about that. And also this sort of plays into like mind muscle connection, which I think is pretty important. Like for example, if you're doing a deadlift or a Romanian deadlift of kinds, then if you sort of like externally rotate your legs a bit and just really orient stuff, like you can lift a lot of weight. But then if you actually sort of internally rotate your feet and your legs and sort of focus more on putting your weight on the inside portion of your feet and kind of like the ball, like the inner ball of your foot, and actually internally rotate your legs, then you'll feel way more hamstrings, but you'll probably be a little bit weaker. This is why a lot of times you might see people who can bench a lot, for example, but then they say like, oh, I don't really feel my chest at all, but I'm doing all this weight, and like they need more weight to try and feel their chest, when really it's not about how much weight you're doing, it's about the way that you're actually like performing the exercise. Yeah, so that's the first point. Basically, push to failure, but make sure you're actually using good form and putting that tension in the muscle. And once you can't do another rep with that good form, that's failure. You don't have to start orienting stuff just to get more reps because that's arbitrary. That's not actually training the muscle. Okay, point number two is basically to not obsess too much about trying to optimize every little detail. And now, I don't know if you're like this, but for me personally, I'm very like logical, sort of analytical type of thinker. Like, I like to think about a lot of stuff and like overthink stuff. I remember when I was sort of in my first year or two of training, I was super obsessed with all the details. I would track every set, every rep. I would be just tracking everything meticulously, and I would always be really concerned with all those small details. And the thing that I realized is like, yeah, obviously that stuff can be important and it's good to like think about your training, not just like go in the gym, do whatever. But at the same time, a lot of those small details, it's like you can be a little more loose with it and go by feel some days. Like I remember I used to think that people who like went based off feel when they went in the gym were just they were just doing it all wrong. I couldn't even believe it. I thought like, I have to have this specific exact optimized program that I'm gonna do every single day, like every single time that I do this workout. But really a lot of times like once you get more of a feel for lifting, it's like it can be more optimal in a way to just go with what you think is gonna be best that day. And that might be different from week to week. Obviously this isn't to say to like change things up, but for example, maybe one day like I'm supposed to do overhead extensions for triceps and then skull crushers, but maybe skull crushers haven't been feeling that great and I don't want to do them and I just do more sets of overhead extensions and that's perfectly fine. Also when it comes to tracking every sort of set, every rep, like I still think it's good to track. What I do is basically I track just the first set, like the weight and reps usually, and the key here is to not get too obsessed about progressive overload either, because basically, if you keep always trying to add a rep every time, then you're probably going to be sacrificing your form, especially if you're thinking about that during your set. Like if you're doing your set thinking, well, I got like 10 less last time, I need to get 11. Well, then guess what? Your body's going to do whatever it can to get that 11th rep. And chances are it's not going to be through actually putting the tension through the muscle. So it kind of even relates to the first point a bit. Yeah, pretty much track your workouts a bit. Like you don't have to be too strict with it. I don't even always track nowadays, but pretty much don't use that number in the moment to try and beat it necessarily. More so use it as a long-term way to see if you're making progress, more so in like weeks or months. Like you can look back in the last few weeks or month of training and see if you've been making progress, right? But like don't try to necessarily go in there and think about beating that rep goal. Because at the end of the day, it's about stimulating the muscle, right? And just because you're trying to beat that rep goal, like even if you don't get the rep goal, if you get even less reps, if you're still training hard and putting tension in the muscle, you're still going to be stimulating it. So even though it can be good to track your workouts and try to optimize things, it's just not sometimes as important as significant as other things you could be focusing on, which leads me to number 3, which is probably one of the biggest things that I wish I knew. And it's gonna be really simple, but it's basically just bulking, gaining weight. That is like the biggest thing to make progress, especially if you're starting out skinny like I was. That is the absolute most important thing you should be focusing on. Obviously, training and stuff is important too, but genuinely, I will go like months sometimes where my training is near perfect. It's amazing, right? It's optimal, whatever you want to say. And but the only problem is if I don't gain weight through that period, I genuinely will look the exact same. I will not make progress. And, especially if you're starting out skinny because, some people maybe they're a bit bigger, right? They can sort of recomp sometimes, but nah, for me, like when I was 90 pounds, like you better believe I needed to fucking gain some weight to actually look better. And yeah, definitely don't even think about main gaining and especially not cutting ever because I remember like a while back, I was probably around like 120 pounds, and I thought I needed to cut because I started noticing the absolute tiniest, minuscule amount of like 0.1% gain in body fat. And I was like, oh no, I need to do a mini cut. Like, bro, shut up. You need to keep bulking and just eat more. I've gained like over 50 pounds since I've started working out, and genuinely, that's the time I notice the most progress is when I'm gaining weight. And at the end of the day, some people want to say that bulking is bad, maybe, or maybe that you should bulk slowly. But honestly, if you're starting out small, I think you can actually gain weight like at a pretty quick rate. Some tips I can give for bulking is, first of all, to track your calories. I've been honestly slacking on this lately, and it definitely makes a difference when you're tracking your calories because you actually know how much you're eating. so you can sort of modulate that to put yourself in a surplus and be sure that you're in a surplus. And also along with that, tracking your weight and stuff. I mean, I have a few other videos on bulking you can probably watch, but a quick tip is try and sort of like plan out your day of eating of like what it would look like. So kind of like if you have an app where you like track calories, right? You can kind of go in there and just map out a full day of eating and basically see like think about how many calories you need, right? So for me, it's probably like around like 4,000, and just map out like what food do I need to eat in this day to get me that many calories, and just try to replicate that every day. But yeah, I just remember I used to be super obsessed with my training, and I would like try to do that really well, and that was good, but I would just not do the same for my diet. And arguably, if I had to choose one, I think it's more important that you are gaining weight. Like if you're gaining weight and your training is like suboptimal, it's it's whatever. You just kind of you work out, maybe you train hard, but it's nothing special, but you're gaining weight. I think that's way better than if your training is absolutely perfect for you, but you're like not gaining weight. Okay, point number 4 is take your training seriously. And this kind of sounds like it's contradicting number 1, but I think it's very important. And I'm just saying, like, in general, you need to take your training seriously. And you know what? It took me like a year or two of training, of working out, just to look like most people's before photo. Okay. Like, was at such a low starting point. Like, my genetics are not good. Okay. And things, I have to take it seriously and actually try. Because some people, you know what? Some people, they can just go and fuck around in the gym and they get results. You know, they already look good, but chances are that's not you, and it's definitely not me. And so you really just gotta take it seriously. And it's like, do you want to just go in there and fuck around? Like, you can't just walk in the gym and just sit down on the machine and start doing it. Like, no, you gotta like actually prepare. And you know what? Maybe I sound cringe for this, but I don't even give a fuck. Okay, just you gotta think about just someone who hurt you, something bad that's happening to you, like something you're angry at, something you're mad at. Just you just gotta think of something to fuel you and use that and actually train hard. I don't even give a fuck if I sound cringe right now because it's true, okay? It's true. Like it helps to think about something that you're fucking angry at and use that energy to actually like push the way hard and go to failure, obviously with good technique. And I just see too many people going in there and just doing whatever, just going through the motions basically. Just they're just not really in the right mental space. You know what I mean? And you know what the thing is? I don't want it to be easy. It feels good to go in there and train hard. You know what I mean? Like I'd feel like shit if I just went in there and did whatever and just kind of went through the motions and didn't take it seriously. So imagine how everyone else feels when they do that every fucking time. Because at the end of the day, like you can implement whatever advice, you can optimize your training, you can do whatever. But if you're not really like serious about it, then I mean, what do you expect? I think music honestly helps a lot. I listen to metal, and you know what? Honestly, I'm just gonna say it. If you listen to rap or like basically anything else in the gym, then you're not training hard. If you listen to literally anything but metal, you're not training hard. But like seriously though, just take your training seriously and set some goals and really just work hard to achieve them. You know what I mean? Like don't just go in there doing whatever. Like know what you're gonna do and do it hard. You know what I mean? Like, fuck that. That was horrible. But in all seriousness, though, if you actually want results, then train like you actually want results. And to be honest, it's more fun that way, anyways. And the fifth and last point is basically patience and consistency. And I know you probably already heard this, so I'm not gonna just go too deep with that. But pretty much, just know that obviously it takes time and you're going to be in it for the long run, and you can't expect results just right away, and don't get demotivated if like you don't see change immediately or like week to week or month to month, because just know like in the long run you'll be able to tell who put in the work and who didn't, like in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now, like if you've been lifting for that long, you'll be able to see, and the time's going to pass anyway, so you may as well put it to good use. And like I was saying about how some people just kind of have it already. Well, I used to sort of look at them and be like, oh, like I wish I had that, like and just feel kind of like behind it, you know what I mean? But like once again, just know with time, if you're putting in that work, like you'll be able to see eventually. And the people who already had it, well, you know what? they already had it, so they don't want it as much, and therefore they're not going to be putting in the same work as you. Because, if you're like me and you started super skinny, right? Like you kind of have that drive in you from the beginning because like you're at such a low point, and so that's gonna keep you going even further than most people are. Whereas the people who just kind of had everything from the beginning, you know, they're satisfied. They're okay with that. They're not going to go any further. And so eventually you're going to surpass them. Honestly, I don't know how this video turned into like a bit of a motivational speech or whatever, but I don't know. I hope you found something useful. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next one.